I don't think it's hyperbole to say that the 2010s were a fantastic time to be a gamer. Skyrim, Grand Theft Auto 5, Batman Arkham City, Red Dead Redemption, and its sequel, all of these were wonderful titles, and many more were released between 2010 and 2019. Still, it seems like for every excellent video game released last decade, there were a dozen absolutely plop ones, games so awful that they should have never been imposed upon the world. For this list then, we've taken a look at the games of the last decade, fed them all into our patent-pending video game quality determining machine, trademarked, and used the results to decide which are the most plops. Though all of these games did horribly with critics, everything on this list is our own opinion, and whilst there might be worse games in existence, these are the ones that hurt us personally the most. I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are the 10 worst games of the 2010s. Number 10. Duke Nukem Forever, 2011. Those of you who watched our 10 worst games of the 2020s video might have come into this one thinking the first few entries at least wouldn't be complete stinkers, and instead just mediocre titles that may have offended us in some way. But no, they are all horrible today, just how we like them. Duke Nukem Forever was a long time coming. Originally announced in 1997, the first-person shooter went through delay after delay after delay before finally crawling onto PS3, Xbox 360, and PC in 2011. A sequel to Duke Nukem 3D, a game which isn't half bad if you don't mind a bit of lewdness, Duke Nukem Forever sees the eponymous muscle-bound lad coming out of retirement in order to quash an alien invasion. You'd think that 14 years in development would mean that Duke Nukem Forever would have its plops together, but you'd be wrong, because it fails at every turn. The gunplay feels thin, the controls are clunky, it takes an age to load, and don't even get us started on the poorly aged humour. It feels like the script was written at the beginning of development and never iterated upon, because all of the jokes have a decidedly 90s feel, and not in a good way. There is really no wonder there's been neither sight nor sound of Duke since, outside of a few guest appearances. He's probably imploded from the shame. Number 9. Aliens Colonial Marines, 2013. Alien and its sequel Aliens are some of the greatest sci-fi horror films ever made, and so it's hardly surprising that over the years, multiple games based on the series have been released. The absolute worst of the worst, though, is 2013's Aliens Colonial Marines, a game that did something we never thought possible. It made the aliens unscary. Set shortly after the events of Aliens, Aliens Colonial Marines is a first-person shooter that puts players in the shoes of the titular military unit as they attempt to rescue survivors aboard the Seleuco spaceship. And it's a complete mess of a game. Its gameplay is bland and uninspired, the graphics look cheap, and it's riddled with bugs, but not the sort that might attach themselves to your face. Are facehuggers actually bugs? I don't know if that joke works. Modders have attempted to improve the game in the years since, but even with various fan-made patches, it's still not a game that's worth anyone's time except maybe the biggest Alien fans. It gets worse though, because just a year after Aliens Colonial Marines launched, Alien Isolation was released, a game which not only offers a truly frightening experience, but also made Aliens Colonial Marines look even sillier. Number 8. Saw 2 Flesh and Blood, 2010. At the time of writing, there are 10 Saw films in existence, but although they run the full gamut in terms of quality, with Saws 1 and 10 topping most fans' rankings, whilst Jigsaw and Spiral languish at the bottom of the heap, not one even comes close to being as much of a letdown as Saw 2 Flesh and Blood. Well, maybe Spiral. Honestly, Chris Rock's monologuing is more painful than any of the traps. You might expect, though, that a game called Saw 2 would at least tie in with the movie of the same name. But you'd be wrong. Into the needle pit you go, wrongy. No, Saw 2 Flesh and Blood follows David Tapp's son, Michael, who, whilst investigating his father's death, becomes a target of the Jigsaw killer. The first Saw video game wasn't great, but Saw 2 is considerably worse. The gameplay is repetitive, the combat system is a nightmare, and the constant QuickTime events entirely disrupt any tension the game has managed to build. With that said though, Saw 2 Flesh and Blood does have some truly hilarious moments, and in that sense is definitely worth playing, but with a few friends over some libations. That being said though, it still very much belongs in this list, don't you worry about that. When Jigsaw said he wanted to play a game, I can say with some certainty he didn't mean this one. Number 7. Agony, 2018. I know we've made this joke before in other videos, but if there was ever a game whose moniker described the experience of playing it, it's 2018 horror title, Agony. In Agony, players take on the role of a martyr condemned to hell, who, by sneaking around the infernal landscape, possessing other martyrs and various demons, and solving puzzles, attempts to escape the fiery prison to which they're damned for all eternity. On paper, this sounds like a winning formula. Hell is a scary place full of scary folks you'd probably want to avoid, so a stealth horror should totally work. But alas, the only thing scary about Agony is just how bad it is. The main issue that we and many others have with Agony is the fact that it seems to go hard on the shock value, all whilst fundamentally misunderstanding how to scare and/or disgust its audience. Sure, it's initially unsettling to be surrounded by gore, viscera, and naked people, but after a bit, you do, surprisingly, get used to it. And because the game has bombarded you with it already, there's really nowhere else for it to go from there. Tack on some unforgiving stealth mechanics and a near impenetrable story, and you end up with a game that truly is as painful as its name would suggest. Number 6. Hatred, 2015. Right, so we've ascertained that trying to sell your game on shock value alone doesn't get you anywhere. So here's another title that did exactly that. Hatred is a game about a bloke named Not Important, yes really, Not Important, who doesn't like people all that much, and so sets out on a crusade to kill as many as he possibly can. And that's pretty much all there is to it. You go around killing people for no other reason than the protagonist feels like it. Unsurprisingly, no one particularly enjoyed Hatred. At its core, Hatred is a completely uninspired isometric shooter with repetitive gameplay, whose only USP is its so-called edginess. The fact is, though, that whatever commentary the developers were trying to make on society or whatever falls entirely flat due to a complete lack of nuance. Supposedly, Hatred is a critique on political correctness, though in our experience the only people who complain about that are those who keep getting called out for being awful bigots, but the end result is a dull game about mindless violence that doesn't actually have anything noteworthy to say. What is noteworthy, though, is the fact that several of the devs have been alleged to have neo-Nazi leanings, leading some to speculate that Hatred's true message is one of white supremacy. We should say, though, that the studio has denied this, so we invite you to just read up on the story if you're interested. The articles are out there, and make of them what you will. Number 5. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, 2015. The Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series is known for many things. Its banging soundtrack, rosters of recognizable skaters, and, prior to 2015 at least, its quality. Alas, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 came along that year and ruined the franchise's legacy, sending out the mainline numbered titles with a whimper rather than the bang they deserved. There is a reason why Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 seems like a total rush job though, and that's because it is one. The licensing deal between Tony Hawk and Activision was set to expire at the end of 2015, and rather than just letting it go or trying to negotiate an extension, the publisher decided to have one last Pro Skater title developed in just a few months. The result was a game that was, quite frankly, unplayable. No, literally, upon its release it required a day one patch to even get it running. Even with the patch though, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 is in a sorry state. It looks worse than the PS2 Tony Hawk's titles, the gameplay is more like something you'd find in an arcade, and of course it is teeming with glitches. Speed might be an asset in real-world skateboarding, but not in skateboarding game development, it would seem. Number 4. Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric. Over the years, we here at Team TripleJump haven't made any attempts to hide the fact that we're not massive fans of Sonic the Hedgehog, so we weren't exactly what you'd call excited when Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric was announced, and the fact it turned out the way it did simply cemented our position on the blue spiky lad. Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric sees Sonic and the gang attempting to put a stop to the last ancient Lyric after Sonic accidentally frees him from a 1,000-year imprisonment. See, this is why we don't like you, Sonic, you idiot! Over the course of the game, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy must prevent Lyric from acquiring the Chaos Crystals, all whilst fending off Dr. Eggman, Metal Sonic, and Shadow the Hedgehog. Though it might look alright in places, and even that might be too generous of a compliment, Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric is truly awful. Numerous technical issues and bugs, tedious combat, irritating recycled voice lines with references to way outdated memes, and a general lack of polish are all reasons why players should lob this game into the nearest bin at supersonic speeds. Number 3. The Quiet Man, 2018. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll probably know that we here at Team TripleJump just love our FMV games. So much so, in fact, that we're making our own. Please check out the unexpected but not entirely surprising demise of Jacques Duschnozzle on Steam. Shameless plug. As such, we were particularly upset with 2018's The Quiet Man, a truly miserable FMV title about a young deaf bloke named Dane who must get to the bottom of the kidnapping of a singer. The USP of the game is the fact that it attempts to put players in Dane's shoes by removing much of the sound, which is great in theory, but in practice it meant that most players had absolutely no idea what on earth was going on. The option to play with sound has since been introduced to The Quiet Man, but this isn't the only problem with the game. Whilst the FMV cutscenes aren't bad, the gameplay is fairly uninspired, and the combat is let down by a rather unhelpful camera. Plus, the fact the story is incomprehensible without sound meant that the game seems to imply, intentionally or not, that deaf people are unable to understand the world around them, which is completely untrue, of course, and rather offensive, to be honest. I'd give this one a miss. Number 2. Alone in the Dark: Illumination, 2015. Here's the thing. But seriously, here's the thing. Alone in the Dark is considered to be one of the greatest video games of all time, and is generally thought of as the father of the 3D survival horror genre. Sadly though, as good as the first game was, the series has never been able to recapture the magic since, and in 2015, the franchise hit an all-time low. Dear Maria, count me out of whatever this nonsense is. Alone in the Dark: Illumination is a third-person shooter for up to 4 players, though we highly doubt you'd be able to find 3 people willing to play it with you. The game is set in an abandoned mining town in Virginia, home to an ever-present malevolent force known as the Darkness, and we can assure you it does not believe in a thing called love. Alone in the Dark: Illumination has some good ideas. The premise of monsters that are only vulnerable in light is a concept that other games, like Alan Wake, have pulled off well. The problem, though, is in the execution, as Alone in the Dark: Illumination is plagued by bland gameplay, unfair difficulty, and a smorgasbord of bugs. This is another one that's best left alone, and preferably in the dark. And number 1, Ride to Hell Retribution, 2013. According to critics, Ride to Hell Retribution is not the worst game of the 2010s. However, having played it for ourselves, we can only assume that all of the critics were in a particularly good mood when they reviewed it, because not only is it, in our opinion at least, the worst game of the 2010s, but it's also one of the worst games of all time. Buckle up, kids, it's going to be a very bumpy ride. Ride to Hell: Retribution, the colon being where the developers of this game seem to have pulled it from, tells the story of Jake Conway, a biker who sets out on a quest for revenge after his brother is murdered by a rival motorbike gang. You name it, Ride to Hell: Retribution gets it wrong. The gameplay is dull and repetitive, its controls are janky and often unresponsive, and the graphics were outdated even in 2013. Furthermore, the voice acting is laughable, it's buggy and glitchy beyond belief, its portrayal of women leaves a lot to be desired, and the adult scenes, which play out with the characters fully clothed, are the most awkward thing we have ever seen in a video game. We can only assume that the 1% on the cover art references the amount of effort put in by the developers.